Hey everybody, it's Ashley and welcome into my City State kitchen. Today I'm going to make some homemade whole wheat bread. It's actually a whole wheat, half whole wheat, but I'm going to actually be using some of the sprouted wheat that we've made in a previous video, which I'll link if you want to see how I do that. This is the first time I've tried using my homemade sprouted wheat flour in this bread recipe. This bread recipe is a classic, pretty much no fail, super good. It's sandwich quality, not just toast quality bread, and I love it. I have found that when you're making homemade bread, a lot of times it can be easier to just have a little bit of foresight to make a little bit more than you might need right now. Making bread can take a little bit of time, but surprisingly, this recipe takes less time than some of the other ones that I've tried. So if you're going through the process of making it, it can be really helpful to make even just 2 loaves instead of 1, which is what we used to do all the time. In fact, we got to where we made 2 loaves. One we used for more sandwiches, one we used for toast, and with the one we used for toast, we really like to mix in like walnuts and cranberries and things like that, because when you put that in the toaster and they get nice and toasty, it's so good. So it's very customizable in terms of that as well. But one of my big things that I love about this bread is that it makes really good, moist, slightly sweet bread that can be a great option for sandwiches. Sometimes homemade bread, in my opinion, makes less ideal sandwich bread. If you've ever tried making like the no knead breads and those artisan loaves and things like that, I don't know if you like that bread for sandwiches, but I have a harder time with that. So this is one of those recipes that not only is easy, it's pretty much no fail, but it can be used for almost anything that you want to use bread for. So in addition to the homemade sprouted flour, I'm just going to use an organic all-purpose flour, a little bit of salt, yeast, and there's sweetness, and I use a little bit of brown sugar and a little bit of honey. So the sweetness comes from both of those directions. A tiny bit of milk, which you can use any kind. It does not have to be a dairy-based milk. And then water and a little bit of oil, and that's it. So let's go ahead and get our bread mixed up. bread first comes out of the oven, you can coat it lightly with a little bit of butter or any kind of oil if you want, just a super thin layer, and it actually helps to keep the bread a little bit more moist. I did do that with mine, and I did actually crack it open because one of my kids wanted some bread. So I have not sliced it all, but I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I have a really nice long bread knife, and I'm going to do about 1/2 inch slices. I don't want it to be too thin, and I certainly don't want it to be too thick, but a nice 1/2 inch will give us a good slice of bread. This bread slices so beautifully. I almost feel like I was struck by lightning when I found this recipe. In fact, the recipe is no longer online. The website is not up anymore. And I've come across that a few times where blogs that I've saved recipes from, even 10 years ago or so, they just don't do it anymore. Their URL is inactive and you can't find all of their recipes. And I'm kind of bummed because I know the site where I found this bread recipe, she had a lot of really good recipes. So I'm glad I have it saved. So the middle one is a little funky because I cut it so quick, and my center didn't rise quite as much as I would have expected it to. I might have pulled it out a little early, but it didn't pillow on the top the way it normally does. But look at that. Look at that beautiful sliced bread. It just makes such a nice moist sandwich. That I could have also added a little bit more flour when I was doing the kneading process. During my initial, I added some more all-purpose flour, and I ended up also adding more of the sprouted wheat flour. But as I was handling it, it did get just ever so slightly sticky. Nothing to where it would come to my hands, but I could just feel it as I pulled my hands away from the dough. And then also, after the initial rise, when I was getting it ready to go in the loaf pan, I also felt just a little bit of stickiness. And if I had I didn't pull my flour back out, but if I had, that would have been completely eliminated. Might have had something to do with the center not coming up quite as much, as just being a little heavier, but super delicious bread. I can't wait to dive into this and get this back into our household routine. If you're at all interested in making your own homemade bread, this is really one of those recipes that you'll want to make sure that you keep around because it is so easy. It's pretty quick, it's very forgiving, and you can use it for almost anything. Even shape it into buns of different kinds if you'd like. Thank you for coming along with me today as I get back into my bread making routine. I love having you come along. It really helps me. I hope it was helpful to some of you. I know there's been a request for a bread recipe, so I wanted to make sure that I got that out there. And if you would like to see more of what comes out of my kitchen, more ways that we're trying to switch over to so many homemade good things and also save money at the same time, please consider subscribing. I hope you have a wonderful day and we'll see you soon.